Well, thank you so much, Idea Jen, for bringing us back for a talk today. And I'm really excited to be introducing some of my colleagues and our students here at Limitless Solutions as we talk about innovation, bionic arms, and how the intersection of interdisciplinary research is what's necessary to drive innovation forward, in particular with the backdrop of biomedical engineering. Today we have a great talk for you, and I'm going to introduce just a few of our panelists here. And so we have our faculty, Matt Dombrowski from the University of Central Florida. Would you mind introducing yourselves to the team?
Hi there, I'm Matt Dombrowski. I'm an associate professor in the School of Visual Arts and Design, and I also serve as creative director here at Limitless Solutions. Good to be here.
Thank you, Matt. And then we are joined with 3 of our students representing part of the research taking place at Limitless Solutions from all different academic backgrounds needing to work on the same group projects, which makes it a lot of fun. So we're going to start with Shea McLinden. Shea, would you mind introducing yourselves for the team?
Hello, my name is Shea. I am a research scholar at Limitless Solutions, and I'm studying health sciences. I've been at Limitless for just over a year now, and I'm really enjoying my time here.
Thank you, Shea. We also have Kelsey Robinson from the research team as well. Kelsey?
Hi, I'm Kelsey Robinson. I'm also a research scholar here at Limitless. I am double majoring in math and statistics, and this is my 3rd semester at Limitless.
Thank you, Kelsey. And Devin Lynn.
Hello, I'm Devin Lynn. I am one of the research scholars here at Limitless, and I am majoring in biomedical sciences. It's also my 3rd semester at Limitless.
An interesting part of the pandemic has definitely been the adaptation to a hybrid work model, including a heavy emphasis on video calls, just like this one, and being able to pair that both inside the classroom and outside the classroom for being able to learn the skills for the career field and for graduate school, but then also being able to still get things done so that we can drive forward that innovation. At Limitless, we've been doing that kind of from the beginning, being able to leverage some of those tools, but it has certainly felt like every week has been unique and changing. And all of you at home, I assume, are going through the same experience that we have. But I wanted to start with Matt. Matt, how has this affected, not just at Limitless, but also in the classroom as you've been working towards being able to maintain that same quality and excellence of education while maximizing the interaction safely?
Yeah, thanks, Albert. Yeah, I think it's been unique, and it's really allowed us to kind of shift some of our learning objectives to focus more on communication and more on kind of bringing a little bit more of that humanity back into the classroom. I think we often kind of maybe we overlooked that pre-pandemic, where we would be in a typical large lecture hall learning, objectives and outcomes. If anything, that pandemic did bring us closer, and by the shift into virtual learning, not only did we, face that challenge of adaptability, like you mentioned, but it was a different type of communication that we were all not used to. So, having the students still maintain that creativity and that innovation is one thing, but allowing them to be able to kind of transition that into a way to how do you communicate that visually. So I think here at Limitless, we've done that always very well because we really focus on visual storytelling, and we focus on, no matter the major, all of our students are creative. And that adaptation here at Limitless was a little more seamless than most. And I know outside of the Limitless bubble in my own classroom, there was a lot of things I learned here at Limitless and working here at Limitless about teamwork and collaboration that I definitely brought to the classroom. So, multimodal types of check-ins, using things like Google Chat, all that stuff, to kind of have that community and connection was super important, because that ultimately gave our students, which I believe it gives our students, investment and ownership. And maintaining that during the pandemic was the tough thing, because there was a lot of things we didn't have control of. So how do we take that learning in the classroom back to something where we can control. And I think our students especially have done a fantastic job with that adaptability. Thankfully, they're all computer literate and have that technology background, so it was a relatively seamless transition.
And I think you're absolutely right. Whether it's Microsoft Teams or Google Meet or Zoom, it feels like we've been living in this hybrid world for the last 18 months, and trying to maximize those engagement points as safely as possible has been a real priority, especially here at Limitless. I think that for students, you've been experiencing a university experience that's very different from kind of the previous students that have gone through the program or kind of sat in your classrooms as well. And so Shea, you started at Limitless at the beginning of the pandemic and then transitioned to then being in person as we kind of got our health guidelines underway. Could you share a little bit about your experience on the clinical research team here?
Sure. So I started fully virtual at Limitless, and then I experienced a little bit of a hybrid format where I was virtual for some meetings and then in person for things that had to be done in person. And now I'm experiencing an almost completely in-person experience with a few virtual connection points with other people. But it's been a really interesting experience going through that and changing and adapting along the way. Like Albert mentioned, every week has been different. I've had to come up with a lot of innovative and creative ways to connect with people each week when we're not all in the same place, when we're not all working on the same time schedule to advance the clinical trials and the research here at Limitless.
And Shea, you've been working on the clinical translation team at Limitless. What does that mean, and are you enjoying it?
Yes, I am loving my time at Limitless. I have had a very exciting and interesting learning experience with clinical trials, which is something that I was never exposed to before, but it's right down my major with health sciences. I've learned a lot. I've been exposed to hospital settings and interdisciplinary teamwork, which has really allowed me to branch out as an undergraduate and learn a lot of really interesting things about like safety and privacy of human participants and like what that means from getting a clinical trial from start to running it.
Limbitless Solutions has been focused on developing bionic arms, from the sketchbook to the computer program to bring that 3D design eventually to life using advanced manufacturing and 3D printing. And one of the challenges with taking an engineering project all the way from that like sketchbook to the clinical trial phase and working with hospitals is that there are a lot of different phases and a lot of different like regulation points in order to do that safely and successfully. And so Shea, you touched on just a little bit of the training and the requirements to appropriately work on a clinical trial in a healthcare environment. What were some of the things that you learned from that training experience? And did you think you would be getting into that kind of in this interdisciplinary environment?
Right. So there's been a lot of learning experiences along the way. One of the things I found most interesting that I didn't think that I was going to learn about was the really like complex and important history of clinical trials and how they've developed over time, both in the United States and globally, and how that has affected policies that are now implemented and how that changes the way we look at participants in clinical trials and the way checks and balances that we go through to make sure that everyone is their safety and privacy is of number one concern, and working through with them to have them participate in the research.
I think it's been an incredible backdrop watching our society really dive into what is a clinical trial in the context of the pandemic's treatments and vaccines. And we've been hearing a lot about these, how you set up a trial. And so for your time at Limitless applied to the bionic arms, you've gotten to hear that backdrop of information, but then really be able to apply it. And I think that that's a really unique area for undergraduate students getting involved in research to be able to participate and getting to be in those conversations with the hospitals, I think we can all agree what we learned at the end of the day is it's really complex. Both Devin and Kelsey have also been engaged through the research team, but come from pretty unique backgrounds academically. Devin, kind of starting with you, working in that very interdisciplinary environment with other majors and other skill sets, has it challenged you in any way to have to think differently?
Thank you, Albert. Limitless is an incredibly diverse environment, and we have a variety of people from different majors. As a result of that, it is definitely challenging sometimes to work with them and to figure out how to design the best product available. As a biomedical sciences major, a lot of the time, especially early on, we're focused on the more conceptual side. Whereas here at Limitless, we're designing a final product that can be used to help people. And that's something that makes Limitless so amazing, is that I can go across the room and discuss with an engineering student how to best design an interface for something that I'm researching, such as with our Xavier project.
And Kelsey, you've been challenged from your math and science background to then apply that towards advanced manufacturing. Can you talk a little bit about some of your initial experiences with that, and what was it like being able to transition from that more academic classroom environment to more of a machine environment for manufacturing?
Yes, well, definitely I have had a unique experience here so far at Limitless, one that I'm very excited to continue. And just being able to work in such an interdisciplinary environment has allowed me to expand beyond what is traditional for my majors and work in engineering environments and even art environments. And that has really allowed me to express my creativity, which isn't normally afforded to my majors. And I've really been able to learn and collaborate with people from a lot of different majors. And so it's really helped me branch out in my studies.
Traditionally, people think about robotics or prosthetics as this colder carbon fiber or dull plastic finish. And Kelsey, some of your work has been not only on the structural components or that technical component, but then being able to translate that into the automotive airbrush techniques to be able to bring some of that color and expression to life with the arms. Now, coming in as a math major, did you anticipate being involved with some of that high creative colors and expression?
I would have never anticipated working with paints in general, let alone such beautiful artwork. And I'm very grateful that I have been able to have that experience, because not many people who major in math or statistics will have this experience, and I am definitely better off for it.
When we talk about innovation, it's usually the intersections of different fields having to form a shared language, being able to translate techniques or design structures to be able to move across those traditional silos. And here at a university, being in silos is relatively easy. It's much more difficult to be able to branch out. And so, Matt, from your experience, being able to watch students from a wide variety of majors have to come in and then be able to translate that, what do you think have been some of the challenges? And then ultimately, where are we seeing the success in being able to translate that?
Well, I think we're absolutely starting to think about how we kind of transition out of that traditional classroom. What they learn in their classes in their respective majors is absolutely a necessity, but we're finding in that time period that a lot of students aren't getting exposure unless they're at an internship or an opportunity kind of extracurricularly, where they do have something completely different. So for us, it's really about exposing them to that kind of bi-directional STEAM. So if you have someone who typically, like Kelsey, who typically maybe deals with math and numbers and formulas, what can we do to disrupt her system in a good way and say, hey, here's an airbrush, now deal with colors and and the psychology of design and visual design. And we do that across the board, whether that's an artist now being told, hey, you're going to work with thermoforming or engineering. That seemingly has worked rather well, because as they get that foundation in their amazing undergraduate classes here at the University of Central Florida, we're able to kind of supplement that and hopefully allow like another level of learning to occur. And I'd be curious to hear from a few of the students, and I'm sure we'll hear in a few minutes here, but if that's helped them in their classroom environment. So they take things from the classroom here to Limitless, but has there been any opportunity, obviously, to take that back and kind of apply that to their absorption of that learning? And I think ultimately, as an educator, that's want to do, try question things, shake up the system in a good way.
Absolutely. I think that some of that, how you described it, kind of like that bilateral steam, has been one of the drivers of the innovation that we've been experiencing here at Limitless. And the hybrid environment has certainly made us have to work a little bit harder to be able to facilitate that. But it does open up some new opportunities to be able to learn, whether it's online learning or being able to take from kind of like Matt from one of your classes where a math major might not ever get experience to that as easily during their time at university. For Limitless, being able to take those techniques and apply them to the final piece of robotics, I think that has been one of those unique components. But for all of our students who go through the program, we do hope that they'll be able to walk away from the program when their time is complete, and that they've seen kind of the advances that can make, whether it's in the classroom or in prep for their career. So Shea, starting with you, have you seen some things where you've been learning it at Limitless and then taking it back into the classroom?
Certainly. There has been a lot at Limitless that I've been exposed to, I think, prior to even learning them in classrooms. For example, the clinical trial stuff does not come up until much later in my career as a student. So I've already been exposed to things that I'm going to be learning in the classroom, which has only made that experience that much easier. But additionally, when I'm working at the lab in the interdisciplinary setting, I've really learned to collaborate and use a new type of language to communicate with engineers and artists, which are people that I'm not typically working with in the classroom in the health sciences major. So that's been a really valuable experience to be able to learn how to communicate across disciplines and get ideas and information across in a collaborative team.
Thank you, Shea. And Devin, your trajectory is kind of towards that, towards medical school and kind of getting a diverse background to be able to leverage when you're facing those challenges and ultimately kind of in that healthcare world. Are there things that you're picking up that you kind of didn't anticipate syncing up with your classes?
There are definitely a lot of regions of Limitless that I can apply back to my classes. One of the biggest things for me is that here at Limitless, I learn a lot about the engineering side too, but I also go through and do research in diseases like ALS. And I can apply that back to my classes, not only in the terms of how it medically affects somebody, but how it affects their life and how we can design products to help those people. And that's something that I wouldn't really get anywhere else, because a lot of medicine is just examining the hard physical facts of what's happening to a person, rather than examining how we can help them using engineering and others.
It really does take all of those different subcomponents to be able to take the technology and then apply it into a healthcare environment. And I hope we'll see more innovation zones kind of form around this like translation of the research and the technology, as opposed to remaining in those silos, because I think it provides a much more rewarding experience. And we are also able to work into the design phase some of that feedback loop from the end user, whether that's a bionic kid or soon to be bionic adults. And for our viewers, Limitless has announced some partnerships as we look to be able to translate the original bionic arms that we've been working on now for a new population, including veterans, other adults with traumatic amputations, and also first responders. And I think for our team as a whole, that has been kind of that next innovation challenge to be able to translate what we're doing for one population, which has a lot of different like tonalities on how you approach building that bionic arm, whether that's the aesthetics and the art component of the prosthetic. There are different priorities depending on the different users. And for us, it's really been about how can you listen and then incorporate what you're hearing. And for all of us in the research environment, that reminder to be able to listen to the demographic who is going to be using the accessibility device, I cannot state that enough. That is the priority, because those end users, they will see things differently that you cannot experience here in the laboratory. And if we want to do a better job in any part of healthcare, I think that that type of listening drives the innovation, and it has to be that starting block. For all of us, I think that that's been one of our biggest takeaways of running the first clinical studies in the country on these 3D printed bionic arms is we want to try to do something new, but ultimately we've seen the kids use the bionic arms quite differently than we use them here in the lab. And that could be on the playground or anywhere around their house or school. And sometimes just getting into those situations have been outside of our normal perspective. And Shea, you've had the opportunity to work with some of our bionic kids through that clinical phase. What are some areas where you've seen things not go as we planned, and then how are we moving that forward?
Sure. So there's a lot of really interesting things that you can't exactly prepare for or predict what a child may do in certain situations. So it's all about being adaptable and looking at different situations and how you can best provide for, in this case, a child who's using a bionic arm to help prepare them for a study or using the arm or training, especially with the video game devices, and then which translates to the actual use of their prosthetic. So it's definitely something that you can't write down in a textbook. It's more of an experience thing and learning as you go.
And Matt, we touched just a little bit on the innovation required for training. Can you speak a little bit more about how the science of training and then the aesthetics of whether it's gamified training can ultimately support children learning how to use their bionic arms?
Absolutely, yeah. Training is a unique thing for all of us, because whether it's a kind of, if we were taught the wrong way, or if we were kind of pointed in the wrong direction or exposed to something in a way that wasn't as pleasant, we're typically not going to want to continue to pursue that. And bionics are the same way. So if a child receives a bionic, it doesn't work the way they think it's going to work, that adaptation to that bionic, or that they're wanting to actually use that bionic, is going to lessen as they go. So for us, we've always saw it as sneaking in the vegetables through video games and using fun methods of training and gamified methods of training to keep them not only interested, but also provide a platform in which, before they even receive their bionic, they can train, they can have fun, they can play, have an experience that maybe differs than their friends, that is their own, that they use in their particular case with their limb difference. That transition to the bionic arms has been, again, amplified by video games. And our goal now is to make those games as accessible as possible in the standards of tablets, mobile devices, their computers, wherever they can train or play, or again learn how to kind of master that device through the video games, the better. And so we will continue to make video games for our veterans and first responders as well, and talk to them and learn from them. And these games are not only for training, but it's also kind of opening our eyes to inclusion in video games, representation in video games, assuring that games are meant for all, and fun should be had by all when people play video games. And so we have kind of multiple levels of design to think about when we kind of structure those trainings.
I definitely appreciate hearing you get to talk about some of that gamified training and the role of representation in gaming. And that's certainly been a hot topic around the industry right now of how we better represent and better include a wide range of peoples and demographics to be able to be as forward as we can be with pushing the innovation. And we believe here at Limitless that the diversity of voices and perspectives is ultimately what drives innovation, especially if you're looking for perspectives that have kind of that intersection tones and being able to leverage one perspective in a different field and then bring it into another environment. And as long as you can get that translation to be as smooth as possible, kind of going back to what we described as like a shared language, even between artists and engineers, of how you go about making something and bringing that creativity to life. Ultimately, there is kind of the point where you're going to be able to pull forward, whether it's the product or the research item or the organization into the future. All of this comes together when we start to look at how a prosthetic really relates to the user, and that bond that's kind of formed between machine and the human, that human interface with the machine, is so unique, and it's very person to person of how they respond to the device. And I think that with the prosthetic side, being able to bring in that high, bold color choices that can kind of amplify the 3D geometries, it really challenges what a prosthetic can look like, and ultimately kind of what the role of a prosthetic is, because we've looked at prosthetics traditionally in the past from kind of the vantage point of like a medical environment, looking at prosthetics as helping fill in a gap for someone who's lost something. And I think what we've experienced, especially with children who were born missing limbs or having a limb difference, they view their own limb as in a totally different way than maybe the textbooks would write about it. And for what we've experienced with them, the bionic arm becomes such a focal point for expression and customization, more similar to a fashion item or even kind of like the specifics around a tattoo, and it becomes this part of your identity, but something that you get to choose and create and personalize. And that's one of the beautiful things, is that as the child grows up, their bionic arm accessories and customization grows up with them as they just kind of swap in and out the aesthetic components over that structural core. I think all of these things together, we are seeing biomedical engineering and biomedical sciences really start to take those steps forward. And I'm curious if that we're experiencing this boom of healthcare related fields is interwoven into the fabric of our society, having to address and confront the changes from the pandemic, whether that's how we work or how we think about health, and the importance of putting our community together and making it as strong as possible for not just me, but for my other colleagues in the room. We're definitely seeing that tonality change altogether here. And so we appreciate being able to share a little bit of our Limitless Solutions stories and being able to hear from our students and our affiliated faculty who are able to bring their perspectives that are very different than my own. And together as a team, hopefully we'll continue to work one day at a time to be able to change the world little by little, for one person, then two people, and then kind of scaling up from there. And it all comes down to being, how can we communicate about innovation and being able to amplify each other's creative ideas. So thank you so much to all of our panel members here today, and to IdeaGen and Christian for having us on air today. And we are so grateful to be able to share a little bit more of that perspective.